Call this meeting of the Yardley Borough Council to order. Please join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance to our flag. I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you. Mary Ann, if I could turn it over to you for our roll call. Is she with us? All right, Mary Ann, you with us? All right, I don't see. So let's just go down the line. Do it myself. Councilwoman Thompson.
Here.
Councilwoman Siegel Morris.
Here.
Councilman McCann.
Here.
Councilman Curtin.
Present.
I am here. And who am I missing? Councilman Ross is not with us, and Councilman Feiner.
Present.
Present, and looks like Mayor Harding is not with us this evening as well. All
I'm
right.
here. I'm here.
You're here. You pulled in. You're listed as Pixel 4, not Chris. So you fooled me.
My apologies.
All right. So let the updated record reflect that Mayor Harding is with us tonight. All right. With that, we'll open the floor for community announcements. I have nothing to offer at this time, but if any member of council has something, we'll let you go first. Afterwards, if a member of the community has something, we'll offer that. So members of council, any community announcements? Hearing none, does any member of the public have a community announcement they wish to offer at this time? I didn't hear none there. We will move into the public comment portion of the meeting. This is the portion of the meeting during which members of the public may address council regarding items that do not appear on the agenda. If you wish to address council regarding an item that does appear on the agenda, you will be given an opportunity to do so during council's deliberation of that particular business item. Members of the public are asked to please state their name and address for the record. And to also note that we will be limiting public comment to 3 minutes per person this evening. So with that, I will ask if there's any public comment. And I see a raised hand from Dr. Perlmutter. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, Dawn Perlmutter, 18 West College Avenue. I just have one comment regarding the auxiliary police. When council voted in, Chief Kelly specifically said that the officers, the auxiliary police would be wearing vests with large lettering that reads auxiliary officers. I noticed on the Yardley Police Facebook page that the volunteers are in actual police uniforms that are identical to the Yardley Borough Police bicycle officer uniforms, and that they now have patches that are also very similar. From a distance, actually, they're almost indistinguishable from actual officers, which I think is problematic in that, you know, the public will not understand that these are volunteer officers. And also, the other thing that I noticed on this Facebook page is that our borough manager, who's also our borough secretary and who is also our right to know officer, is now a member of the Yardley Borough Auxiliary Police. And she was volunteering during the day, handing out flowers. I think this is a conflict of interest, particularly since there's most of the time there's nobody answering the phone or responding in the office. Certainly have no problem with her volunteering her time, but during the day when nobody's in the office, I think the chief can handle handing out the flowers. So again, I think the auxiliary volunteers are a good idea. Maybe even suggest them cleaning up the anti-police graffiti that's still there, and actually there's even more of it. But I don't think that our borough manager's time is spent during the day. I think it's a clear conflict of interest.
Okay, Dr. Perlmutter, thank you for your comment. Are there any members of council or staff that wish to follow up?
Sir, I'll follow up as to the uniform. The uniforms are a different color from the regular police uniforms. I never said it would say auxiliary huge across the back. I said they would wear traffic vests when conducting traffic that would say, that would show that they're reflective. The uniforms are royal blue. Our police officers wear a French blue, two totally different colors. Their hats will be a different color. The patches clearly say auxiliary. The badges clearly say auxiliary. They wear blue jeans as opposed to pants with stripes on them. I'm convinced that the public will have no issue distinguishing them.
Thank you.
And then
Chief.
also the flower handing out was after hours.
Thank you, Manager Johnson. All right, moving on. Is there any further public comment this evening? I see a raised hand from Kim P. is how you're listed in the attendance. You can unmute yourself. Go ahead.
Thank you. Kim Prickett, 20 West College Avenue. At the last meeting, Dawn Perlmutter brought up yet again issues that she has with 20 West College Avenue. We believe that Dawn airs her disdain for us at a public meeting in an effort to turn others against us. She tries to manipulate facts by interlacing them with lies. She bullies, she targets, and she harasses. During her interview for the open council seat, Dawn stated she works with law enforcement and does seminars. And you have to wonder if she teaches law enforcement this behavior of interlacing lies with facts, targeting, harassing, and bullying innocent individuals to make them look guilty. Dawn has told my husband—
This is slander, and you're allowing this woman to slander me. She doesn't live in Yardley Borough. I suggest that you stop this immediately. I never
Dawn has
mentioned
told
him
my
by
All
husband—
right,
name.
everybody, I'm
This
going
is
to ask both
slander.
of you to stop.
I am not going to
I'm
allow
going to ask
to be
Dawn to stop. I'm
slandered
going
at a
to ask
public
Ms. Prickett to
meeting.
stop the public
This
comment.
woman does
I
not
am
live
going
in
to ask-
Yardley Borough. She lives in Lower Makefield on Big Oak
All right,
Road.
you are
She's
both
not
going to be
slander
removed from the
me at a
meeting.
public
We are not doing this tonight.
Mr. Bria,
Thank you. Moving on, is there any other further public comment this evening? Hearing none, we will move on to consideration of the consent agenda dated for tonight. Is there any member of council which would like one of these items to be considered separately? And just for the record, the items on tonight's consent agenda are the minutes dated for October 20th, the bills list dated for tonight, November 4th, a banner permit for the American Legion Christmas tree sales, Christmas tree lighting event permit for December 5th, and the Yardley menorah lighting on December 12th. And I will at this time state for the record, I will abstain from the vote on item A, which is the minutes for last session since I was not here. Are there any objections to consideration of these items as a whole? All right. Do we then hear a motion for approval of tonight's consent agenda?
I'll make that motion.
All right, motion has been made by Councilperson Thompson. Is there a second to the motion?
Second it.
All right, and the motion was seconded by Councilwoman Siegel Morris. Do we have any discussion from members of council? Any discussion from members of the public? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Are there any opposed? Any abstentions? And hearing none, that motion carries 6-0. Moving on to Chief Kelly's report.
Thank you, sir. I only have one item tonight, and that is monthly service statistics for October 2020. The police department handled 498 calls for service. I'm sorry, scratch that. I was looking at the wrong year. 684 calls for service. Issued 3 parking tickets. Issued 74 moving traffic citations. Investigated 6 motor vehicle accidents, and made 2 arrests, both of which were for DUI. That concludes my report, sir.
Sorry, I was muted there. Thank you, Chief Kelly. Are there any questions regarding the police chief's report? And hearing none, we will move on to engineer's report.
Hi there, can everyone hear me? Awesome. I don't have anything different from the general updates that were included in the engineer's report submitted to council last week. And we have 3 things that require approval. So unless anyone has any questions about those updates, I'm going to get right into the approvals if that's okay.
Any questions? And hearing none, let's move on to those items.
Okay, awesome. So the first one is payment certificate number 3. We need to approve the certificate for $34,663.82 with a retainage held of $4,834.45 for the Main and Afton Signal project. The payment would be to Armour and Sons Electric, Inc.
All right, do we hear a motion for the approval of change order number 1?
No, this is the payment certificate 3. We have to
I'm
do the
sorry.
certificate first and then the change
Sorry,
order.
I'm looking out of order on the agenda. Do we hear the motion for payment certificate number 3?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
The motion has been made by Councilwoman Thompson, seconded by Councilman McCann. Are there any questions or discussion from council? Any questions or discussion from the public? Hearing none, I will call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Are there any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, that carries 6-0.
Okay. And then we have the change order number 1. I don't have a value for that. It basically was to kind of zero out the differences between some of the quantities that occurred because we had some changes in the placements of poles and such like that. So I guess I just need you guys to approve the change order. I know all the supplemental information was provided. I think it technically is reducing the overall contract value by a little over $1,000.
All right, do we hear a motion?
I'll make the motion to approve change order number 1.
Second.
That motion was made by Councilman Finer, seconded by Councilman McCann. Are there any discussion or questions from council? Any discussion or questions from the public? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? And hearing none, the motion carries 6-0.
Okay, and then the last approval we have is for the resolution where the North Main Street Sidewalk Project Phase 2 for the PennDOT MTF grant that is due at the end of this week. It is for a grant of $312,147, and the borough's match for this would be about $93,000, just for clarity.
Okay, do we hear a motion regarding the resolution for the North Main Street Sidewalk Phase 2.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Motion is made by Councilman McCann, seconded by Councilwoman Thompson. Are there any questions or discussion from council? And any questions or discussion from members of the public? Oh, Matt, I see you. Go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't get it up in time. Hey, Liz, just real quick, what's the cost for applying for this grant? Do you have an estimate on that?
Yeah, so we would not exceed $2,000 for the grant application, and we're almost done putting together. I was actually QA/QCing the package earlier today.
And this is one we applied for already, right, or not? This is have we applied for this in the past? I can't remember.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we have. Yep.
Thank
We slightly changed the scope, but it matches what our scope was for the DCED MTF grant that we submitted at the end of September. But this is PennDOT's version, so it has a few more hoops that we have to jump through and provide. But we were encouraged to reapply for this now that we have closed out the Phase 1 PennDOT MTF project.
Okay, I got it. Thank you.
All right, do we have any further questions or discussion from either council or members of the public? All right, hearing and seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Are there any opposed? Any abstentions? And hearing none, that carries 6-0.
Okay, we can then get on to the specific project updates. I don't really have much difference from what was in the report, but the highlights for the Main and Afton intersection was that I did have a discussion with our traffic engineer and PennDOT, and there had been a question about whether or not we could shave down the extra height on the poles, like the pedestrian signal poles. And I was told that there is nothing keeping us from doing that. That is something that we can do if that is desired. So if the borough wants us to check in with Armour and Sons about what that would cost, I can do that. If not, let me know. And then in regards to the big poles themselves, when it comes to the look and feel of them, you can get decorative bases on them if you want, but that's not something that would ever be covered by grant funding, which is probably why that was nixed 4 years ago when the original design for this got looked through and approved. But if that's something that the borough is interested in, then you can look into those decorative bases to kind of spruce up what that intersection looks like. However, the size of the poles is not something that can be changed.
And when you say that reducing the height, how does that work exactly?
You would just shave off the top of them and replace the caps. You can't change the height of where the signal itself is. It has to have a 7-foot clearance. That's the only thing we're not allowed to change with regards to the pedestrian signals. But any part of the pipe that is above where that 7 foot is can be shaved down and recapped without violating any of PennDOT's standards.
So it's the part that's, so it's like there's the arm that sticks out, it's the extra, like the stub sort of.
Yeah.
How much does that currently stick out?
I don't know that off the top of my head. I know it varies because basically the contractor just got the same size pole for all of them and then put the PED signals at that 7-foot clearance.
And do you have an idea, just a ballpark of what it costs to do that? Is that like a simple thing or is that like an expensive ordeal?
From my understanding, what the traffic engineer was telling me, it's really not that big and it's something that your maintenance people would do, which in Yardley happens to be Armour and Sons. So why they have the open contract for the signal itself, I don't foresee it being a super extra thing, but we would have to ask them to give us a quote for that effort.
I guess from my perspective, I need to look at it again to have a sense of, I don't remember from my head as much to get a sense of whether maybe we should all do that, see if it's worth pursuing it.
Is it worth at least asking Armour and Sons to give us a quick quote? I can't imagine that would be a huge effort on their part.
If that's just a sort of email.
Yeah.
Find out, that would be very helpful.
Okay, I can
In the
have that.
meantime, those
prepared
of us
for
who
the
want
next
to can
meeting.
look at it.
Okay,
Sounds good. Yeah, thank you.
and then I think I saw Susan's hand up.
Susan, go ahead.
Thank you. I brought this up because when you're at the intersections, the pedestrian signal posts extend above the roof lines of the buildings. So essentially they're obscuring the architecture of those buildings in the intersection. And they are one thing that you can do at this point in time to make what happened there a little less obtrusive. So I would strongly encourage you to pursue that. It shouldn't be all that expensive, and it will enhance the architecture of the buildings.
So Susan, it sounds like the part you're talking about is this part that's above the 7 foot. Yeah, so I think we're talking about the same part, and that might be a
Yeah, no,
inexpensive and very doable solution to, or not bad solution, but at least a mitigation to the issue you're talking about, which is a real issue. I acknowledge seeing it myself. I agree with you personally.
thank you.
Thank you. And it looks like comment from Mr. Gudati.
Good evening. Pete Guadati, 44 South Bell. I'm just curious if we are going to go forward with this. When we asked for the quote, can we ask it to be done during a routine maintenance or a repair visit rather than having a special visit come out with 2 or 3 guys in a truck and tying up the intersection? It's normally quite a bit less expensive to make a trip to do the maintenance and repair and whatever extra we want, rather than making 2 or 3 trips out.
Yeah, that's a fair comment for sure.
It's not something that immediately needs to be done, but if we can do it as a group effort, it'd be better. Thank you.
Hey, stop.
Thank you. Any further comments on this
Main and
particular?
Yeah. If not, I'll move on to Mary Yardley Bridge. Okay.
All right.
So Mary Yardley Bridge, I was able to get in touch with DVRPC to verify that a portion of the project is eligible for their trails grant that is due next week. They did give us the okay, and they did let us know that if we wanted the rest of the project to be eligible, we would have to make it multi-use accessible, which means making the bridge 8 feet wide. And I said that that's probably not something that the borough is interested in doing at this point in time, but thanked them for their suggestion. So we will continue moving forward with the project as it is currently designed, and bifurcate out the portions associated with realigning the towpath and apply for this grant. And that is about it for Mary Yardley Bridge at this point in time, unless anyone has any questions.
Liz, I actually did have one more question about the intersection. Sorry to go backwards. One more question, and this, Susan might have some thoughts around this as well. The signs that say Afton, Maine, the large sort of road sign, are we required to keep those signs at that scale as opposed to like pedestrian scale?
Unfortunately, yes. Any PennDOT intersection, they have very strict standards about signage and the size of the poles, how long the left turning lanes have to be. All that sort of stuff is very predetermined. We don't get a lot of choices in that sense, unfortunately.
So even in a historic district, they don't make any kind of accommodations for the location size of those signs? Because it wasn't there before. That, I mean, obviously it's new, but it was a tiny little, you know,
we can certainly
sign.
ask, but my understanding when I spoke with Derek, when I asked about what kind of special provisions happen with the historic districts, he said that there are newer regulations now that didn't used to be there, and there are some that you can get grandfathered into or out of but most of the ones that are tied into safety and visibility, there's not a lot of workaround. And signage like that tends to be under that safety bubble. But I can certainly ask PennDOT directly if there's anything that they do in regards to that.
Yeah, I would appreciate that only because I think that's another, that falls under another like very, very inexpensive yet potentially significant mitigation we could do to the impact of that. It would be
Okay.
nice to know if we have any options. Thank you very much.
Sure. Okay, back to Mary Yardley. Did anybody have any questions about Mary Yardley at this point in time or no?
Yeah, Liz, I had a quick question. When do you think a sketch of the project plan will be done? We've tried to ramp up now that the elections are over, our canvassing and fundraising efforts, and that would be helpful. Members of the committee have asked for a project plan for the scope of the project and sequencing.
Yeah, what are you looking for? Like, do you want something that's kind of more like a rendering versus what our like construction plans look like? Because those
I
are better.
I think it's a timeline of the different, goals, where we're going to be at, and, eventually the timeline and when the project will be finished.
Okay, yeah. We could totally get that going again now that we got approval from Dcnr last week of our updated grading plan. So we're at the point now where we're getting ready to submit for the permits. So we can probably give an estimate of when we think we'll receive those, and then when we hope to have the bidding schedule and then construction. At this moment in time, we are still on, as long as we secure funding to move through construction, we're on schedule to construct in the spring.
All right, thank you. And Ms. Taylor, is that your hand from earlier, or do you have a Mary Yardley Bridge question?
Mute.
Actually, could I just interject? Just told about an hour and a half ago that the towpath elevation project between Fold and Summers Camelback Bridge expect to be done on November 11th. So, and I want you all to cross your fingers and toes that we have fairly temperate weather and the grass seed will grow.
Actually,
Yeah.
Susan, while you're here, DCNR has already agreed to provide a support letter for the DVRPC grant application that's due at the end of next week, but they suggested we ask the Friends of the Delaware Canal. Are you a good contact for that, or is somebody else?
Nope, me. Just
Cool.
send me an email.
Will do.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Mhm. Bye all.
All right, and then moving on to the Pico lot, unless there are any further questions about Mary Yardley. Seeing none. All right. The Pico lot actually attended this morning a 3-hour workshop for DCNR's grants that are due in the spring. That was very useful to be a part of, and we will do what we need to make sure we have a much stronger application for the land acquisition of the lot. Right now, we're kind of waiting to see what the CED committee comes up with about how they want to proceed forward with regards to the offer letter that needs to be sent to PICO to continue negotiations. It was reiterated at today's workshop that they want ready to go projects, and with regards to the land acquisition projects, that means having a sales agreement. So do we have any report back about if CED has made a decision about what they want to put forth in the offer, or is that still ongoing?
Paula, do we have any updates there? Do you know? It looks like nothing new.
Nothing new.
Okay, the grant application opens in January and closes in mid-April. So we have some time, and now that we attended the workshop, the regional advisor will now come out and do a site visit with us for our project and give us as many pointers as he can to make sure we hit all of the different criteria that they grade the applications on. So we're in a good spot. Additionally, there are a couple of other grants available that are applicable to other projects we have going on. So I sent a little write-up to Paula about that, and we'll do more in the next report so that the rest of council can see and you all can brainstorm what other projects you think are worth going after, especially since Dcnr project grants all are a 50% match. So you really have to think about it and make sure that you have the funding available to kind of go after those projects. And if there's no other questions about PICO, I'll move on to the last project, which is North Main Sidewalk. All right, North Main Sidewalk. Concept plans were provided to the residents. We've received some comments back with some adjustments, which we'll be addressing. And we are in the midst of preparing the PennDOT MTF grant, which the resolution was just approved earlier, and things are looking good. And we will be submitting that at the end of the week. Once the residents are finished reviewing the plans, we'll move forward into final design. And we have already done the preliminary HOP submission where PennDOT will kind of let us know if they think we need a full-blown pre-application meeting. And hopefully we'll hear back from them by the end of the week to see if that's needed. But that will trigger the notifications to all of their different departments, including the right-of-way, which is gonna help us start the process of getting the utility poles moved, which we need moved. And we are going to take the stance that if they're going to move them, we would like them to move them for the rest of the corridor, not just the current extent of what phase 2 is. And hopefully we can push them to do that. But apparently legally, the utilities only have to move what is part of a current project. So we'll do what we can, but we'll move forward through that. There's not any questions about North Main. That concludes my report for tonight. You're on mute, David.
Sorry, thank you. Are there any final questions? All right, hearing none, we will move on to our manager's report.
Okay, besides my report that I already submitted to you, I just wanted to point out or first give a shout out to Lower Makefield Township, who actually gave us a call, and they had some desks that are now new to us. So Patty got a brand new desk and I got an additional one in my office. But we do appreciate our neighbors that did think of us and give us these desks. And then also our little library that you approved a couple months ago, looks like it's going to be installed on Saturday since the weather's going to be nice. So it's something to look forward to for this weekend. And then we're going to roll into our budget presentation. So David, I am going to find Patty and make her a co-host as well so she could share. I think we can have more than one. There we go.
Should be able to.
Okay, and she's going to do a share screen for our 2021 budget presentation. Can everybody see that?
Can everyone see it? Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so here we go. Patty and I are here presenting our 2021 preliminary budget that's for adoption for tonight. The 2021 budget follows the 2020 revised format by individual funds with 13 funds in all. The budget adheres to the guidelines of the Pennsylvania Chart of Accounts for Local Governments established by the DCED. 2020 brought unexpected financial challenges to Yardley Borough with the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. The impact of the pandemic to the borough's revenue sources is expected to cause a 2020 budget deficit of $50,000 to $70,000 due to significant decreases in the areas shown here. We have deferred some expenses that were budgeted in 2020 to our 2021 budget, including but not limited to the roof on the annex, the doors on Borough Hall, additional maintenance and upkeep of Borough Hall, the Mary Yardley Bridge, the North Main Street sidewalk, and a police vehicle. Some examples are the doors on Borough Hall. These are custom-made doors that are expected to cost approximately $4,000 a piece. And as you can see, the insulation in the council chambers ones, and then our front door on Borough Hall where all the gaps are. And at the bottom, it's actually rotting out as well. And then the roof that was resurfaced as a Band-Aid, it should hold for about 10 years. And I believe we're already into our second or third year with that. Just over 2 years ago, we were quoted to have this roof actually redone in its entirety, and it was going to cost well over $180,000. The annex at 1 South Delaware needs a new roof and removal or repair of these dormers that are currently leaking. We are utilizing the annex for some of our public safety equipment, public works equipment, such as traffic barricades, line painting machines, golf carts, the police trailer, sign equipment, traffic barrels, and generators. The annex is very useful to us at this point for a lot of storage with this because we just don't have anywhere at Borough Hall. Borough residents have not seen a tax increase since 2017. I recommend a 4 mil increase for 2021. I suggest allocating into our general fund, which handles our day-to-day operations, including the purchase of police vehicles, taking care of the annex, and upgrades to Borough Hall. By allocating an additional 2 mils into our capital reserve, we will continue to save for the future of Yardley Borough. It was just a few short years ago that our capital reserve fund balance was just over $64,000, and we did not have an emergency fund. In 2018 and 2019, we have been able to build up our savings and start a much needed emergency fund. Our current balance for these funds are now, the emergency fund has just over $141,000 in, and capital reserve has just over $196,000 in. We collected more than $6,000 in delinquent occupation and per capita and delinquent business privilege taxes in 2020. We continue to focus on ensuring that these collection of the monies owed to the borough moving forward. Our tax levy will be 28.73 mils. The tax levy is distributed into multiple funds as noted on the slide here. On this slide, you will see how a mill is calculated and what it means to the borough. 1 mil is approximately $35,004. Of the total, 28.73 mils equaling, this gets a little confusing, approximately just over $1,005,000. 22.66 mils are earmarked for general purposes. And then there is the remaining 6.07 mils are allocated towards dedicated funds such as your fire protection, street improvement, street lighting, ambulance and rescue squad, the recreation, and then the capital reserve with the new 2 mils. So just capital reserve, if we did the 2 mils there, that would bring in approximately $70,000 to that fund per year. What this means to our residents, this is just residential owners. The average house is assessed in Yardley Borough for $27,644. Keep in mind that the county has not reassessed the entire county since 1972. The average borough portion of the entire tax bill is $794.21, and these are just estimates. The average assessment in Yardley Borough is $27,644. This is just residential owners. In 2020, the borough tax portion for a house that was assessed at that was just about $683.64. With the proposed tax increase, residents would anticipate the borough tax portion to be approximately $794.21. This would be an approximate increase for 4 mills of $110.57 for the year 2021. This would put approximately $55.29 per household into the general fund and $55.28 per household into the capital reserve. As you can see, the majority of our taxes go into the general fund, with the remaining monies going into the dedicated funds. For example, like I said before, fire, ambulance, street improvement, street lighting. The taxes going into the general fund will be about $626.41 per year, which equates to about $52.20 per month per household. To add the 2 mills to the capital reserve, it will be approximately $55.29 per year, or $4.61 per household. As for our expenditures, here is a high-level view of our expenditures. As with most municipalities, sorry, Chief, the public safety is our biggest expenditure, followed by executive, legal, engineering, and so on. Focusing on the future and key projects, this tax increase will enable us to deliver on some high community initiatives while driving continued improvements to our services, one being the Mary Yardley Bridge pictured here. We continue to apply for grants to complete the North Main Street sidewalk, some of which have required matches from the borough. Acquiring the Pico lot on Morgan Avenue would increase our open space, benefiting our CRS programming and minimizing new construction in the floodplain. Looking beyond 2021, we would like to complete the North Main Street sidewalk to Dolington and continue to look for ways to expand and upgrade Borough Hall. And that is our presentation.
Do any members of council have questions or comments regarding the budget presentation?
Yeah, David, I'll just kind of bring up and just voice my concern. I take the idea that we're representatives very seriously, and I myself am not struggling at all, you know, and certainly, but I know many people in the community are, and there are people out there struggling. I know something like a tax hike, you know, at this time, when we're in a global pandemic, will be alarming to some members of the community who are struggling, certainly, even though it's only small amount per household. You know, I have reservations about that. And especially with fundraising for a public works project and then raising taxes on top of it. I think I worry about that message that it sends to the community in the midst of the fundraising efforts. And going out there, I support all those projects. I think they're all important. But you know, that's one thing that, and I kind of brought up the line of credit for some of these capital projects. I would love us to maybe explore that a little bit more, or if we were going to pursue raising taxes, I would say maybe now is the time then maybe to get rid of a tax. The per capita and occupation tax is cumbersome to collect. I would maybe think about, if you know we're going to move forward with this tax, maybe getting rid of something on the other side that collects a much smaller amount of money. And like I said, that is something that's you know, been around and it's been talked about within the borough too, getting rid of that tax. Maybe we're willing to support it if that was on the table.
Thank you. Councilman Carton, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, John, I agree with a lot of what you said. I guess first, let me say to Patty and Paula, it was a great job presenting that to both you guys. I know you put a lot of time and effort into preparing that and the analysis and the thought, and I thought that was a great job. So congrats on the materials and the presentation. It was very concise and thoughtful. I agree with a lot of what John said. As I think everybody knows, I'm trying to get up to speed on a lot of these issues, and I think I've done so to some extent. I'll respond to a couple points. I think one, I feel as though, from at least my perspective, the millage to the general fund feels to me, I'm going to use the term essential, and I don't, it feels necessary for us to continue to fund operations effectively, to have some type of increase there. I think it's reasonable to debate the capital improvements and the timing of adding a tax for capital improvements. To your point, you've raised, the timing of doing that during a pandemic, and also just the thought of maybe using, some of the debt that we have access to now at a very low cost, and then potentially funding those projects with revenue later. I think the practical implication is it's hard to raise taxes. And so there's a little bit of, if you're going to do it, do the amount you need and let people adjust to it, because it is difficult to come back and do it again. I think that's at least part of my thinking of going this way. Although, as I said, I'm open to discussing that in greater detail. I too, John, had the suggestion of let's get rid of these nuisance taxes, as I refer to them. That's my term, not anybody else's, because I think people would benefit from having those gone. But I've been educated on a little bit is, we're limited as a municipality, as I think most people know, in terms of the method and the ways that we can tax our residents. And those taxes are currently grandfathered. And so to the extent we did get rid of them, it's a revenue cost that we can never bring back again. And maybe there's good thought in doing that because we're replacing the revenue with millage. But it is still a not insignificant amount. I sort of estimate it as around $1 million. So if it's about $1 million that we're collecting through those other taxes, you're and you're doing a $2 million increase here, you're really only getting the net benefit of around a $1 million increase. But those are at least my thoughts, but I think it's a reasonable discussion and one that we should all have openly. And I know Councilwoman Thompson has made some efforts to kind of reach out and do some of that. And I'm around, and I know Paul and Patty are too, for people in the community to talk more about it.
I'm going to just thank you, Matt, for everything you said and contributed. I'm going to just add some thoughts here to actually both of you, John, as well. And thanks also for the presentation. It's very helpful. The other point to add to what you're saying about not being able to put the per capita tax back is that we have a millage limit. I don't remember what it is, but we can't go beyond a certain point. And eventually we're going to hit that limit. It's not that far away. Does anyone know what it is? Maybe Bucky, you.
Yeah, it's the cap is 30 mils for general purposes, but then there are some exceptions where you can add millage on top of that. Some of which is allocated now within your general millage. That could be treated as additional millage. I'd have to go through line by line to figure all that out, but it's 30 mils for general purposes with some exceptions.
Okay, thank you. So the thing is that, obviously the idea of an earned income tax, as we saw when that came around in the past, is not very wanted by the community here. And so the only, the way to avoid that is to not lose our headway with millage, because we could eventually, because the way that the system works, there's inflation. It's just a fact of being, it's a fact of life. And eventually with inflation, we're going to get to that cap. Now, whether it'll be raised or not, or will it get an exception, I don't know. But for that reason, I agree with what you were saying, Matt, not to, even though it's a nuisance tax, it's annoying to collect, it seems archaic, not to get rid of the per capita tax, because it gives us an avenue to avoid an EIT tax in the future. That little bit make a difference. The second thing I want to say, having served, and I've mentioned this before, but just it should be brought up in this discussion, is that having served at the tail end of a council in the past that had spent 10 years being proud of not raising taxes, I saw, as being on a general government, the havoc that created. And it's not, nobody likes to raise taxes. We have to be very diligent about costs. And I am the you know, I could be a little ruthless personally in cutting costs. But you can't avoid inflation. And if you don't raise taxes, you create a situation of not being responsible. So I think it's the responsible thing to do. It sucks that it's during a pandemic, but that's just, you can't, if you don't do it this year, you do it next year, we're not doing the community a favor by kicking that can down the road. It catches up with us because what you don't collect this year, now next year you have a bigger problem because you didn't collect that this year. Plus you have next year's problems. So I think we have to do the responsible thing. And if we want to try to mitigate that by cutting costs, I think that's the area to look at. But trying to avoid an increase, I just don't think it's feasible.
Do we have any other questions regarding the budget this evening?
I do have one question about perhaps, is the chief here today? Oh yeah, there you are, Chief. Hi. Regarding the police vehicle, since that's a sizable purchase, Paula mentioned it. Now, in the past, Chief, you had found a great deal through a lease. Could you speak a moment about what the police vehicle purchase is?
Sure. We purchase a police car every 2 years with the depreciation of 8 years of use over time. We were due to replace a police car this year in 2020, but pushed it off 1 year due to the pandemic and due to cost controls. So the 2020 car is due to be replaced in 2021. We leverage both the Pennsylvania state contracts and a program called CoStars, which is a government cooperative buying program to get the best price. We usually work about 8 vendors to get the price down to the lowest possible price, which is usually far below sticker. And then once we identify that price, Paul and I work together to identify the best government loan program available to us, where we pay for that car over a period of 4 years. And we do so in one payment per year, usually at a very competitive interest rate. That's a program we instituted when I got here. Before that, we were paying for the car all in one lump sum, but we found this to be a little bit more beneficial. The first 4 years we pay for it, one payment a year, and then the last 4 years of the car's life, it's completely paid off.
Great. Thank you for filling us in, and thank you for doing that. I remember the first year you did that, it made a significant difference. And that's the kind of due diligence that I think if we follow that level of responsibility throughout, I think it sets a good tone for going through the budget. Thank you.
Thank you. I see Mr. Gudati. You have a question?
Yeah, I do. Real quick, if I could. 44 South Bell Avenue, Pequoddy. Thank you, Paula, for putting this together. I understand that this is pretty much a tax burden put on the residents. We have about 2,000 residents in the borough, and we pretty much pay for all the bills. I'm going to bring up a quick question because I don't understand, and maybe you could help out. Can you tell me how our businesses within the borough contribute to paying for some of the services that they eventually use? Residents pay residential tax. How do our businesses contribute towards paying the bills within the borough? And I didn't see any business-related contributions to our budget. Can you help me out with that? Thank you.
Well, they have the business privilege tax that they pay every year, and that's 500 or 1% of their gross, whichever is the lesser of the two. And then they also do pay property tax if they own that building as well.
Okay, so the maximum any business will pay is $500 to make however much they make. If they don't own the building and they're leasing, then they're not paying the taxes the property owner is.
Correct.
So I could open a business and make $1 million and only contribute $500 towards the services of Yardley Borough.
Absolutely. But I'm sure you would donate some of that $1 million to Yardley Borough as well. And
Oh.
right, Bucky. And Bucky, I believe our business privilege tax, isn't that grandfathered in as well?
Yes, correct. That's one of the grandfathered taxes. Yeah.
Right.
Right. I'm just asking whether or not there's some way to have there's nothing wrong with contributing and donating. I think that's awesome. I do think that there's a responsibility to pay for some of the additional services that are needed, the additional police services, sewer service, and the like. I don't know how that could be done, but the question is, can our businesses contribute at least as much as the residents do? Thank you.
Well, I think one way would be the dreaded EIT, but I don't think we would like to go there as the first town in this area.
Well, Newtown has it and some of the other towns do have it, but aside from this, is there a way to get some reparations back from the business through some business tax, not necessarily that one you spoke of? And it's just a discussion for the future, because it seems like the residents are taking up the burden of the entire budget, while many of the businesses are using our services and for $500 a year. That's all. Thank you.
It's a good point. Could you give an example of where because I think there are also fees. I mean, could you give an example of areas that you think are glaring where businesses are essentially using services they're not paying for?
Individually? Well,
or just are you referring to any particular use? I'm just wondering if it's something that might be fee related. Where do you see that happening?
Well, I know that over the past 20 years, our population has been plus or minus about 2,000 residents consistently. 10 years ago, we have 2,000 residents plus or minus. We have 1 square mile of land. Yet our police requirements have jumped from 3 officers to 13, or the number of cars we have is increased. We're talking about $700,000, give or take, to protect us. Some of that has to be attributed to increased traffic, to maybe some requirements on Friday and Saturday nights that were not here in the past. I'm not picking on an individual business. I'm just saying that there has to be an equitable way to have some of the businesses contribute more than $500 a year, when an individual resident is paying $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $8,000, $17,000 or $16,000 a year. It just seems like there's an inequity there. That's all.
Yeah, although I don't 16. I just want to make sure that you're not including the school tax. Just the municipal tax. I don't think there's any property paying 16,000, but I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, well, the new homes on the hill, you're right. It's broken up borough and school, yes. But $500 just doesn't seem to be a lot of money to operate a business. We haven't increased that in how long?
I think that the issue is there is the limit. Maybe, Bucky, could you maybe just share a little bit about what the limitation we're up against with that one?
Yeah, I sitting here tonight, I probably can't give you the details on the the legal status of the business privilege tax and whether it could be modified at this point, changed, increased, because it is one of those, I'll call it archaic, something that's been around a long time, and it's essentially grandfathered. So I'm not sure what we could do with it without taking a closer look at it. But certainly it's worth reviewing what the options are within the Local Tax Enabling Act as far as business taxes go. We could certainly provide counsel with more information on that if you wish.
I certainly don't want to drive businesses out, but I don't want to drive residents out either. Residents' taxes constantly increase. The business taxes have not. And just seems to be a little bit of inequity. That's all.
Just following up a point on Pete asked. Pete had mentioned that officers had risen from 3 to 13. I don't know the exact number, but is there expansion of the police force that has happened because of the growth of businesses? Is that a legitimate point? Paula?
No, not because of businesses. It was just growth because of growth. It wasn't anything because of our businesses. Do you agree, Chief?
I know that the police department had 5 full-time officers in the mid 1980s. So I don't know, the growth we added was part-time police officers. We have the same amount of police officers, full-time police officers now that we had about 35 years ago.
Also, I think this, there's maybe more life in Yardley than there was, when I moved here almost 10 years ago. And I appreciate businesses for, sticking it out during the slower times and making our town a nice place to be. And I certainly wouldn't want to hurt them either, so going back to, I think there's the limitation of 500, which I remember from going through this last time, which we'll find out more about, but I'm not personally in favor of the idea of sticking it to the businesses who are struggling to survive, especially the retail businesses. Property tax has the benefit, which a lot of people brought up during the EIT conversation, that it's very simple. It's millage. Every property gets taxed. Whatever you're doing there gets done. And yes, it's true. Maybe the existence of a retail business, because it's bringing people to town, uses more police resources, but we all benefit from that also. I'm not sure that you could then charge the businesses who are, on Main Street and have them pay for that whole thing, because it gets a little tricky. Who's really responsible and who's benefiting, I think.
I had a question about the police vehicle. A lot of people in the community always bring up the idea of community policing, doing more, especially if we're such a small town, 1 square mile, using bike, officers on a bicycle or something like that. Is that something that has been explored? I know that comes up every time, when we talk budget and things like that in the community.
We do use bicycle officers in warmer weather as an alternative. However, you can never fully deploy bicycle officers and have any expectation of any real public safety because of the equipment carried in the car and the response time. Just last year, our Narcan saves, if we were to respond by bicycle, they probably wouldn't be alive today.
All right, thank you.
Oh, Paula, can you remind us of what dates we need to hit? For example, if we didn't vote tonight on advertising, what would be our drop dead date that we would need to do that?
Bucky, do you know off the top of your head? I don't have my calendar in front of me.
Yes, the preliminary budget has to be advertised and then available for review by the public for at least 10 days prior to council taking any further action.
So the vote to advertise for tonight is for later in November for the inspection. And then the tax levy ordinance as well has to be advertised, correct?
Correct.
So I guess we just have to decide if we're ready to vote on it, and if we're not ready, what are we looking for? I've heard, deferring costs, which I want to remind everyone we already did this year. We deferred about 60 to 70,000 in costs, and we still have a large deficit because of decreased revenue this year. We've gone through the cost side with a fine-tooth comb, and there's really not more that we can cut unless we cut services or we stop proceeding with capital projects. I'm not comfortable balancing the budget and paying our bills with the line of credit we took out. That was for special projects that we had planned out. So to John's point, yes, it could be used for the sidewalk project, but we can't use it to pay for our police officers. So if we're not comfortable at 4 mils, and then we won't be able to save next year. And are we comfortable with that? I mean, we're not talking about saving $500,000 a year. We'd be saving 35,000 and change per fund per year. So it's still going to take us 10 years to hit our goal of redoing Borough Hall, et cetera. We have to start saving now. So I'm just looking for more thoughts on concrete. You know, I understand it's easy to vote against a tax increase. It's hard to vote for a tax increase, but if you're going to do one or the other, you need to know why you're voting that way and have ideas for alternatives so that we can pay our bills and keep the lights on.
4 mils is $10 a month, right? Or $9 a month for the average house. Is that right?
Correct.
So 3 mils is like $7. I mean, we're getting to a point where we need to do what we need to do, and and personally, I think it's not smart, not wise to, we just have to be sure that what we're asking for is what we actually need. And I know that you've done a lot of cost cutting. The only area I would like to see personally, because I've seen it happen so much, Borough Hall is just becoming an increasing expense because every council, it's like, we don't have enough money, so we'll push it forward. And you end up with doors that are like falling off the hinges and roofs that have
The roof
had
is
patch
falling
jobs
in, and on the annex as well. Yeah.
And this is a historic building. It's our pride. It's the building behind me and here in my house, not, you know, on my background here. So I would love to see, and maybe you have this, Paula, we could do this offline, but just like a comprehensive list of the projects and sort of a longer term plan of how we get Borough Hall back to where it needs to be. Because at a certain point, you know, I think we want to save money, and part of saving money is not letting things deteriorate to the point where they cost us more, which is kind of where we're at now, I think. So that's my only, from what I've seen, that you guys have done a really good job in containing costs. That's the only area I think to me would be helpful, just to think about how much to allocate.
So Uri, Matt, Kim and I are working on a financial plan that's going to look out 5 and 10 years. So we hope to have it done starting January and ending in December of next year. Unfortunately, that's not going to be in time to answer all of your questions. We could give you ballparks on what we'd like to spend on Borough Hall each year, but we're not going to have that 5-year, 10-year for you in time to vote on this budget, unfortunately.
Thank you. No, that would be helpful. The other thing that would be helpful is to know when there's a cost, like, you know, I forgot, was it $4,000 to replace the air conditioner, which did not sound unreasonable for an old air conditioner. But you know, what level of like shopping around happens? Have been multiple estimates, and you know, to a reasonable extent, has there been you know, efforts made to find better prices or better solution, you know, less expensive solutions without causing kick the can down the road problem?
Right.
So is that, we can talk about that offline though, but I would love to learn more. If there's anything you want to share now, it's fine. Otherwise we could do it. I don't want to take up more time, but whatever makes sense, Paula.
Okay. Yeah, we definitely asked for different quotes, such as the annex. We got a couple different ones just to see what else is out there. We're holding off on the air conditioning to hopefully get a little cheaper price in the wintertime when people aren't looking for air conditioners. But, and another thing with the annex roof, to go back to that, one of the roofers did mention to our public works guy that we would get a really good price in the wintertime. So it's okay to wait till winter time and do it then.
Great, thank you.
You had mentioned, or Bucky, this question for you, the millage cap. Where is the barrel in terms of the cap on what they can raise the millage to?
For the general mills, we're at 26.6 now. So if we add the 2 mills that I suggest that for the general purposes would be at 22.66.
Okay. So I'm just looking long-term, and we've talked about, raising taxes incrementally over the years, but you're going to get to a point where it's capped. And that's where, it goes back to the kind of, with some of the issues people are talking about, points Pete raises, are we, is it worth exploring some type of, whether it's an earned income tax or increasing per capita then, or something like that, or revising in some way that, could be more fair, wouldn't, hit people that are struggling as much.
Mm.
And maybe it's opening a can of worms we don't want to open, but just throwing it out there.
Yeah, I mean, broadly speaking, I would say this about the budget at this time, which is that we're looking at advertising that increase. And, as much as I think we probably all want to avoid opening a can of worms, now is probably the time to do it, because we are on a calendar to get a budget passed. And if in a few moments we go to a vote and then we have issues with it, we're going to have to return to it. So, we can proceed in that way and see where we end up over this proposed millage increase. And it could make for a long night, but I think, if we need to consider that this is the time to have those conversations. I mean, the time has arguably been over the past few weeks, but right, we are either doing or not doing this evening. So I guess that is the note that, just generally speaking, I would make on this discussion.
Yeah, Mr. President, if I could, I
Yes.
should have mentioned this when talking about the advertising the budget. It's not like a regular ordinance, where you can't amend a draft ordinance without re-advertising. With the budget, it just needs to be available for public inspection for 10 days, the preliminary budget. And then following the 10 days, if council decides to make revisions to it, that can be done, and then action can be taken, but it does not need to be further advertised at that point. So it's slightly different from a regular approval of an ordinance.
Okay, understood. I guess if we are doing tax increase, would that follow regular ordinance procedures?
Yes, if we advertise a tax ordinance with specific millage in it, then obviously if that were to change, we would have to re-advertise.
Okay, so while the budget itself may be something we can amend, I guess as a practical matter, if we are relying on a tax increase to balance that budget, right, we would have to come up with a number,
right,
that we agree on tonight. Okay, that is my note. If there is further discussion, now is the time. I'm looking through some notes here. Any other items?
No.
All right, hearing none on the budget presentation, the next item on our agenda is the advertisement of that tax levy ordinance.
What was that? You cut out for me, sorry.
Sorry, if we have no further questions regarding the budget presentation, that would bring us to the next item on our agenda, which is a vote to advertise the tax levy ordinance. And it looks like in public inspection of the budget. Bucky, should we separate those votes?
Yeah, I would do those separately because the timing could be different with the tax ordinance as opposed to the budget review.
I'll make a motion to advertise the 2021 tax levy ordinance reflecting a 4 millage increase.
Second.
All right, that motion has been made and seconded. Are there any, although we have discussed, are there any discussions or questions from council regarding the tax ordinance? Any discussion or comments from the public? All right, and for this, you believe we should do a roll call vote. So Marianne, if you are with us, call the roll on the tax levy ordinance.
I am with you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, excellent. Thank you. So is Mr. Ross not there? I just want to make sure since I was.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Thompson.
Aye.
Ms. Steva Morris.
Aye.
Mr. Finer.
Aye.
Mr. McCann.
Aye.
Mr. Curtin.
Aye.
And Mr. Brea.
Aye.
Thank you. Pass.
I'll make a motion to advertise the public inspection of the budget.
Second.
All right, that motion has been made by Councilwoman Thompson, seconded Councilman Curtin. Any questions, conversations on that item? Questions, comments from the public? All right, hearing none, I will call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Are there any opposed? Any abstentions? And hearing none, that motion carries 6-0.
And go ahead, Paula.
Vote to advertise the preliminary budget.
Yeah, were there any questions about the specifics of the budget? And I'm available. I was available this week. Nobody took me up on my offers to meet, so I won't take it personally, but I'm available. Matt's available to go over it in the weeks to come. But are there any questions that we'd like to hash out publicly here? Anything that didn't make sense or?
And if I can add to Caroline, Patty and I are always available as well, and we'll happily sit and go through line item by line item. No problem.
One best practice.
I just appreciate you all just taking it so seriously and doing a great job. So thank you.
Thank you, sir.
For being diligent with the budget.
One best practice that's really helpful is to sit down with Paula and Patty, masked, of course, and just go through the QuickBooks and look at what's pulled out of each account and what's put into each account. It's really helpful to get into the nitty gritty, and I'm sure they'd be happy to do that with any resident who's interested in seeing that as well. So with that, if there's no other questions on the budget, I would make a motion to adopt the 2021 preliminary budget.
Second.
It was made by Councilwoman Thompson, seconded by Councilman Curtin to adopt the preliminary 2021 budget. Any questions, comments from members of council? Any questions from the public? All right, hearing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Are there any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, that carries 6-0.
That is all I have.
All right. There are no other items from the borough manager. We'll move on to a solicitor's report.
Thank you, but I have no report this evening.
That does make it easy. Mayor Harding, if you have a report.
Sorry, I had you on mute. Yes, so two quick things. Please just remember Veterans Day coming up, the Veterans Day observance. So I'd love to see everybody out there. We're going to try to make it really special for them. And secondly, just a quick thank you. We did, I think, a really fun interactive radio show for Yardley Borough at the polls. And I think everybody enjoyed it. And we were able to interview one of our council members who I promised I wouldn't use his name, so I'm not going to call him out. as being John on tonight's call. I won't tell anybody, but thanks for being part of the conversation in the radio show. So that's it. Appreciate everybody's help.
I'll say Chris did a fantastic job. He was out there with a lot of energy, and it was good to see. And got people kind of excited for voting too. So.
All right, thank you. Moving on, we now are to council member reports. So we will just go down the line if any member has anything they wish to report on. We begin with Mr. Curtin.
No report.
All right, Mr. Ross is not present. Next is Ms. Siegel-Morris.
I would just like to mention that during the public safety meeting, the chief reported that several Yardley Borough police officers have donated a portion of their allotted uniform allowances to help offset the cost of the uniforms for the auxiliary police. And the chief is confident that additional officers are also likely to do the same. And I just commend even more evidence of our community police initiatives.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Siegel-Morris. Myself, I have no report, so I'll move on to Ms. Thompson.
No report.
Thank you. You're on, Mr. McCann.
Yeah, in community economic tonight, we talked a little bit about the Pico lot, possible uses, and also just kind of exploring, potential for it and also benefits. And then we talked about Matt and I were discussing potential uses for the annex and maybe kind of taking Paula up on her offer to check it out and, maybe brainstorm some possible uses for the borough.
All right, thank you. Finally, Mr. Feiner.
Nothing to report at this time.
Thank you. That concludes council member reports. The next item on our agenda is discussion items. This would be an opportunity for members of council to introduce any item for deliberation that may be future business. Is there anything a council member would like to raise at this time? All right, hearing none, we have no other business listed this evening. So unless there are any final items, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion was made by Mr. McCann, seconded by Ms. Thompson. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.
Good night.
Good night.